Now, maybe especially now more than ever, or at least the first time in a while, with all of the volatility that we've been seeing in the market as of recent, it maybe is a better time than ever to take a good look inside of your long-term portfolio and maybe have certain areas, certain pillars that are a little bit less risky than others, and try to find some safe havens and some more predictable performing assets, whether that's bonds, ETFs, closed-end funds, or whatever the case might be. Now, even for myself as a 32-year-old investor, I still like to have a portion of my long-term portfolio inside different safer options, and this is just because for my personal risk tolerance, I don't necessarily like my entire portfolio tied up in different assets that are going to yo-yo throughout the months and years. Even though in all reality, I'm a long-term investor, so it doesn't necessarily matter all that much. Now, speaking of lower beta, more predictable, and even somewhat safe for ETFs, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about in today's video. We're going to be going through and discussing TLTI, or the NEOS Enhanced Income 20+ Year Treasury Bond ETF. Now, I'm excited to announce that this video is sponsored by NEOS, and as you guys know, as always, I'm not being paid to tell you whether or not this fund is good or bad, but instead just to share what this fund has to offer, and of course later on share my specific thoughts. So again, especially if you currently find yourself as an investor that has been a little bit uneasy due to the most recent volatility, you're definitely going to want to stick around until the end. Now, first off, heading over to the NEOS website, again, these are lots of the different ETFs that NEOS has to offer. SPYI, the S&P 500 High Income ETF, is one of my personal favorites, and I'm sure a lot of you guys know about that one as well. Or of course, QQQY, the NASDAQ 100 High Income ETF, another one of my favorite ETFs. NEOS does have some awesome products in my opinion, and today we're going to be talking about yet again another awesome product that honestly, because of the current market conditions, probably is a better time than ever. So first off, just looking at the name, this is going to be a bond ETF. Now, bonds, generally speaking, are much more stable there most times and a little bit more boring, but again, they do offer some stability for a long-term portfolio. Now, as a 32-year-old, I personally would never want my entire portfolio necessarily to be made up of bonds or therefore bond ETFs. But again, even as a younger investor, generally speaking, I still like having a portion of my portfolio inside assets like these, just because, like as of recent, when the market gets kind of crazy, I like at least certain areas of my portfolio to be very stable. Now, without wasting any time, going into the fact sheet for TLTI, it says right here, the NEOS Enhanced 20+ Year Treasury Bond ETF, or the fund, seeks to generate monthly income in a tax-efficient manner. The ticker symbol is TLTI. Like I said, the underlying exposure is going to be 20+ year treasury bonds. And again, remember guys, there's going to be different bonds with different durations that are going to offer different things. The total expense ratio is 0.58%. The distribution frequency is going to be monthly. This ETF just started trading late last year in December. And looking a little bit deeper into what this fund has to offer, it says first off, enhanced monthly income generation. The fund seeks to distribute monthly income generated from investing in a portfolio of 20+ year treasury bonds and implementing a data-driven put option strategy. So this fund is not necessarily only going to buy into long-term or 20+ year treasury bonds, but also going to implement an option strategy on top of it, which is going to enhance the monthly income generation. Now, the next portion, this is going to be very important, especially to some of you investors more than others, but to me, tax efficiency is very, very important. It says TLTI utilizes SPX index options classified as Section 1256 contracts, or 60% long-term, 40% short-term, and fund managers may seek to take advantage of tax loss harvesting opportunities. Now, what's great about a lot of these different strategies, especially that we've seen from NEOS in the last year or two, is that you're essentially being offered exposure to a decent amount of income generation, but also through a tax-efficient vehicle. Now, this is helpful because a lot of different assets out there that might offer you a lot more exposure to income potential might have tax implications that aren't necessarily as friendly. Now, lastly, it says professional option management leverage the deep expertise and research of NEOS, combining decades of experience managing options-based ETFs. Now, looking at the underlying holdings, and this is as of last month, late last month, it looks like there is a United States Treasury note bond that's 97.07% of the fund, and then along with it, there are a few put options. Now, as far as potential use case, this is going to be important, especially if you might be considering this sort of ETF in your portfolio. It says TLTI invests in an underlying portfolio of 20+ year treasury bonds and implements an option overlay strategy that seeks to enhance income on a monthly basis, which may offer investors a tax-efficient income stream that surpasses their treasury bond allocation. Now, we're going to go into exactly how much yield and how much income this ETF, at least so far, has distributed historically. And let me tell you guys, it is a lot more than you would normally get by just buying into bonds on their own, again, just generally speaking. Now, key features are seeks enhanced monthly income, which is very important to a lot of us, potentially less sensitive to credit risk and duration risk, and tax-efficient option strategy and ETF structure. Now, some more important facts about this fund, especially for those of you guys who are interested in income generation. We're talking a distribution rate as of right now at 6.85%. Now, before you say, well, different products from NEOS might offer a lot more yield, a lot more distribution rate, remember this is a Treasury bond ETF. This is going to be, generally speaking at least, a lot more stable, and it's not necessarily comparable to a covered call ETF that might have an index as an underlying. Now, like I said, as far as buying into Treasury bonds or even other bond ETFs out there, as far as distribution rates go, this is on the higher end than I've seen across the board. Again, just talking generally speaking. Now, the AUM of this fund is also very impressive. There's almost $1 million in this fund so far. And again, this has only been trading since late December. Now, the distributions, again, this is a relatively new fund, but last year in December, a 26.70 cent distribution was paid. And this was paid once again December 26th of last year. Then the first few distributions so far this year was 26.68 cents. And then just as of recently, 24.52 cents. Now, a 25-26 cent per share per month distribution rate for an ETF that has Treasury bonds as the underlying is not a bad amount of income whatsoever. And this is, again, if you're looking for sort of more of a safe haven, more of a boring pillar in your long-term portfolio. Now, another important aspect about TLTI or any other ETF for that matter, especially when it's an income-oriented ETF or an income that does generate a lot of income. Looking at the max time frame performance as far as price return goes, the ETF is up around 1% more or less on the max time frame. And it looks like since it started trading, it did have a small dip. But then since then, early this year, it started climbing back up and now basically trading at all-time high. Now, generally speaking, depending on what happens in the bond market, ETFs like this one should remain very stable, again, comparing it to something like a covered call ETF that has a single stock or an underlying index. So now that we talked about TLTI, to share with you guys what this ETF is, how it works, what the strategy is, the performance, and even the distributions, I lastly want to share with you guys what I personally think of it and if I would personally buy it for my portfolio. Now, like I said, even though I am a 32-year-old investor, I do have quite a long time frame ahead of me as far as investing goes. I personally, like I said, do use some of my portfolio and buy things like bonds, fixed income, CDs, or even just keep some cash in a money market account and just sort of sit on my hands for rainy days when the market does dip and I can buy some more shares or whatever. Now, that being said, for an investor like myself, I personally am interested in this sort of an ETF because it gives you 20 plus year Treasury bond exposure with, of course, the use of options to generate a little bit more income generation, and it gives you all that exposure for a relatively small expense ratio. Now, again, at 32 years old, I personally would never make a majority of my portfolio into things like bond ETFs in general, but again, just utilizing a small portion of my portfolio, sort of a safe haven area where I can then trade in and out of, use this cash, maybe at times where I need it. I think this ETF could be awesome for that. Now, I also love the fact that this ETF uses different strategies where it does offer a little bit more yield comparing just buying bonds on their own. So all that being said, in the future, when some of my fixed income starts to mature, which it's going to do so throughout 2025, I personally 100% would consider buying some TLTI for my portfolio, at least a portion of it. So now that we talked about TLTI, I share with you guys what this ETF is, how it works, and even my personal strategy. I lastly, most importantly, have a question for you guys down below. Do you personally buy TLTI for your portfolio? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to please drop a like on it and subscribe for more future content like this.